Hi, I am Verdaillia Turner, and this is Let's Talk. We are about to embark upon a series of interviews, and they're going to be organic, dealing with the Atlanta Board of Education race. Very important races. They'll be coming up November 7th. An early interview is right in the middle of October. So we're going to start our interview process with Dr. Ken Zeff of District 3. Hi, Doctor.
Hey, Verdaillia. Hey, Omar. Thank you so much for having me. And I mean, look, this election is so critical for our city and for the trajectory of our school system. And so I'm so excited to see folks raising elevating the importance of this because, there's nothing else on the ballot November 7th. And so to have you guys take some time to talk about this election, I think is just a great service to our voters. And I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, voters don't pay a whole lot of attention to the school board races. And Atlanta Public Schools control about how much money?
$1.7 billion. And, APS is the largest landowner in the city. Not to mention, there's no future for a just, equitable, prosperous Atlanta without Atlanta Public Schools. There's just no way to get there, and so we got to get this right.
Dr. Ken, we usually think about teachers and we usually think about students, but we're going to stray from that a little bit today. Okay. Tell us all of the boards that you sit on right now.
Sure. So I sit on the Board of Junior Achievement Georgia, which is they run programs throughout. I think folks know them. They do Discovery Center. They help support education in Atlanta Public Schools in the region. I sit on the board of the Atlanta Fulton Library Foundation. Just had a great event this past weekend, One Book, One Read. We help raise money for the Library Foundation. I'm actually the treasurer. And I sit on the board of Passport Atlanta, which is founded by the mayor, before he was mayor, which is developed an application that allows students access to some of our cultural riches. It's actually really cool. The kids log in, they go to the Fox Theater, they go to the Martin Luther King's birthplace, they go to the High Museum, they get Chick-fil-A prizes for going to see these, going to engage with these cultural heritages. I think those are the only boards I sit on.
What do you do for a living?
Yeah, so sure. It's a busy time, so I do lots of things right now. But no, my day job is I lead a nonprofit called Learn for Life, which is a partnership of the Metro Atlanta school systems, Cobb, DeKalb, Clayton, Fulton, and Gwinnett, and City Schools of Decatur, Marietta City Schools, and Atlanta Public Schools. And we're just programs. We don't do policy. We just bring folks together. We look for strategies that are having uncommon success throughout a region, and we work to scale those throughout. So think of things like FAFSA completion, teacher or principal training around culture. We work with organizations like Vision to Learn that help put eyeglasses on kids, and we look for things that are working and take them to scale.
Did you found that?
I did not. It was founded by the Community Foundation, the Atlanta Regional Commission, the United Way of Greater Atlanta, and the Metro Chamber of Commerce. And the idea was to bring folks together. What's working? There's lots of good stuff that's working here in Metro Atlanta. How can we do more of that and really put some energy behind things that are working? And that's the way we organize ourselves. And again, working with the school systems to really kind of, if something's having uncommon success for kids that have traditionally been underserved, what can we do to provide those interventions for more kids?
And how did you get into that initiative?
Well, I was finishing up as superintendent of Fulton County Schools, and we were looking for an opportunity to, superintendency is a challenging gig, and I was looking for an opportunity to contribute and to stay engaged, and this nonprofit was just getting started, and it seemed like the right fit for me both personally and professionally, and it's exciting. We're just good news. We just focus on things that are working, and that's a really uplifting way to spend the day.
Let's talk about things that are not working. Give us about 3 and tell us why you think they aren't working.
We're talking about Atlanta Public Schools specifically,
yes.
Because there's a lot of stuff in the world that I don't know about that I'm also have hesitations about. Well, look, I'm in this race because of a few key reasons. The first is the superintendency in Atlanta Public Schools. We're going to be hiring, the board's going to be hiring its 4th superintendent in 5 years. That's a lot of transition. It's a lot of tumult for teachers, for students, and I think we need to get that right. I'm running because the central office is growing at 20% a year, and resources aren't making it to the schools. They're being stuck in the central office. But the thing that really keeps me up at night is literacy. If you look at last year's NAEP scores, which is the nation's report card, 11% of kids of color are reading on grade level in third grade. Said another way, 89% of kids of color in third grade are not reading on grade level. The nonprofit I work with is working with school systems around Metro Atlanta that are making huge gains because they're supporting teachers, they're focusing their work on science of reading and getting together, getting a comprehensive literacy strategy. We can do better, and I think in Atlanta Public Schools, this literacy crisis, and I call it a crisis because it is devastating to the prospects of our kids. We need to do better, and I think we can do better.
The American Federation of Teachers recently launched or renewed a campaign that deals with literacy. And here I am now, almost in my 70s. And
I don't believe it.
I have been having that cake baked ever since I was, learned to read myself at Atlanta Public Schools. Tell us more about how you specifically, empirically, support teachers in the classroom in regards to literacy.
It's a great question, and it's the question because there is no path to literacy without teachers being supported in this work. Teachers, it goes back to ed schools. Ed schools are not preparing teachers you ask teachers in surveys and you say 67% don't feel prepared to teach literacy coming out of ed school. So it is incumbent upon Atlanta Public Schools. We're working with a district we're working with city schools in Marietta, and I think the model they have is right on. They are paying teachers to complete their certification in the science of reading. They're putting $5,000 in teachers' pockets. So instead of paying for a bunch of fancy folks, I don't want to be pejorative, a bunch of well-meaning educators to come in and tell teachers what to do, they put the money in teachers' pockets to complete this certification. If we're going to ask teachers to take it, because the training's for real, it is not something you just do for an hour. So if you're going to ask teachers to take their time to do something, you got to compensate them for that. Teachers give plenty. They already gave when they're buying office or supplies for their classroom. If they're going to ask them to do extra training, then you need to put money in their pocket to do that. You also need to instructional materials need to be aligned. Your principal needs to be trained and too often we have people evaluating teachers that aren't trained in the work that you're evaluating a teacher on. Well, that doesn't seem like a recipe for success. In Marietta, the APs, the instructional coaches, the principal, everyone's getting trained in the same approach to literacy. That's what we need to do in APS. We need a comprehensive approach to literacy, and we're seeing in Marietta got 5 times the rate of growth in literacy. It's 15, 16, 17% growth. They're making a difference. They're closing this opportunity gap between students. I think we need to do something like that in Atlanta.
Can you compare, wait a minute, one more quick. I'm going to let Omar talk in a minute. But can you compare and contrast the social and economic status of that Marietta school district to Atlanta?
Yeah, so Marietta is smaller, but it is 60% kids of color. It is lots of high need, lots of higher actually student mobility than we have in Atlanta. And I don't mean to, and I appreciate the correction. I'm not saying we need to just copy Marietta. My point is we can do better. Other districts are doing better. And I think if we just get focused on a comprehensive strategy, instead of just piecemeal this, piecemeal that, you made the comment of, the flavor of the month, right? Of like just going from thing to thing to thing. We don't see gains when that happens. But if we come together as a board, and I think we can come together as a board to set this direction for the district, I think good things can happen.
All right.
So you actually asked one of the questions I was going to ask. I'm failing to grasp that the city of Atlanta don't have a good program in place for literacy. I understand that it's pretty bad, but I'm failing to grasp after so many years, how can it continue to have such a bad program for literacy? So if you can just kind of speak about that.
Yeah, the science is settled. Like we know what works, but we've had too much of let 1,000 flowers bloom and not really invest in teachers on to support them in this work. And so the consequence is, here we are. We're at a place where 1 out of 10 kids can read. And until we decide, so here's the other piece about it, Omar. Every board meeting we should be talking about this. This is on fire. And instead, oftentimes we're talking about superintendent transitions, we're talking about other things that are distracting us. This needs to be the number one priority for the school board, because it's fixable. We can do better, but it can't be a one of 50 priorities. It's got to be the number one priority, and then I think we can see things happen.
Who gives the data for schools? Do you know when it comes to literacy? Which department?
Yeah, so there's a couple different. So the state, as part of the federal law, tests kids every year, starting in 3rd grade, and that's the Georgia milestones. That's one source of data. Then there's a national. There's a test called NAEP, which is a national test that folks look at, and you can look at, the data is roughly the same. The results are roughly the same everywhere you look.
What I'm trying to get at. So someone has been advising the school board over so many years these data points. Is there a certain entity that advises the school here locally within the Board of Education, meaning here to the Board of Education, this is where we at on literacy? Who gives that data directly to the board?
It's the state.
Okay.
It's the state, and then there's assessments within the system. But this is not unknown data. In other words, this is not breaking news. Unfortunately, it has been around for far too long, and but this is our moment, especially as we're choosing the next superintendent coming up in this fall, or maybe in the spring. We need to make this our top priority.
Okay.
Now, there are assessments, because we can go pro and con with the Georgia milestone. There are a lot of problems with it. So assessments must be aligned to curriculum. What we don't want to do is pick out something that is a problem and not go to the root of the problem. And we apply Band-Aid approaches that may be able to help, because it's a monetary opportunity for anybody to do it. Let me go back for a minute. Your mom, you said earlier, we were talking off camera, was in Chicago Teachers Union, and that's the American Federation of Teachers, local #1. Some people say it's notable, some people say it's notorious. It depends upon where you're sitting. And recently, I think Chicago elected a mayor that used to be part of Chicago Teachers Union. Of course, they can't dictate to him. But here in the city of Atlanta, as we know, the mayor is interested in the school system. He, and rightfully should be, but the mayor does not dictate to the school system. The school system is a government unto its own.
That's right.
And you've had experience in Los Angeles schools. What other schools you've had experience
San
in?
Diego City Schools.
San Diego City.
Yeah.
So you come with a wealth of knowledge. How long did you teach school?
I have never been a teacher. I've never
Okay.
been a teacher. I've always come up through the operations side or the strategy side.
Would you be willing, if you win or don't win, to put all the schools in a basket? Let's put that, like we're drawing little names out.
Yes.
Somebody stick their hand in that basket, pull it out, and that's the school that you have to serve in as a teacher for 2 weeks.
Look, I've substitute taught, so I don't.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. But
Tell us about
but
it,
just
yeah.
briefly, just for a couple days, because
okay.
I don't want to over represent.
Okay.
Here's when I was superintendent of Fulton County Schools. We mentioned this off camera. We had 100 schools. I went to all 100 schools and did town halls with teachers, and I would get that question because teachers would say, "Well, you haven't been a teacher," and I said, "Yes," and that's good news, because the issues that we were struggling with at Fulton County Schools was not that we needed a head teacher to tell our teachers how to teach. We needed a system that supported teachers. And I'm a systems guy. As a strategy guy, I made sure we got more resources to our schools, got support for our teachers. There's instructional leaders that can help with the day-to-day instruction. What I heard from teachers was, we don't need someone that's going to walk into our room we don't need a superintendent that's going to walk into our room and model a lesson for us. That's not what we need. We need somebody that's going to make sure that we can do our jobs, that we can make sure that we're supported, that we have the resources, that I don't have to reach into my pocket to go buy a ream of paper for the copier, that I make sure that I get good communication, steady communication from the district, that we have an assessment strategy that makes sense. So I don't pretend to be a teacher. As I said, my mom's been a teacher for 25 years, and she'll be the first one to tell me that I don't know. What I try to tell folks is, I'm not pretending to be. I'm happy to. I love the best part of the job.
You can't be everything.
Right. The best part of the job is to be in schools, and I was in schools all the time. But I think you got to know who you are in this world. And my job is not to model lessons for teachers, but to set a system where teachers can be successful. And I think when I tell teachers that I'm not trying, that's why I don't say, well, I never substitute taught. I'm not trying to tell folks how to teach. I'm trying to tell folks that I'm here to help you, because there is no path forward for Atlanta Public Schools without our teachers feeling supported and able to do the job they got into this work to do.
Mm-hmm. Oh, go ahead.
So I have a question. I know that we talked about literacy. So what are some of your insights on bringing entrepreneurship into schools and trades, which can often lead to entrepreneurship?
For sure. It's a great question. And we have to get away from this mentality of everyone needs to go to a 4-year college to study poetry or study, so that makes sense for some kids, but it doesn't make sense for all kids. And as Verdaillia mentioned, at Verdaillia at the beginning, I'm on Junior Achievement's board. And Junior Achievement, I think, does a really good job with this, of exposing kids to opportunities really in middle school, so kids can see what they're, what are these opportunities that because you have to light a fire within a kid. If you just tell the kid you have to take trig and then advanced and then calc, that's not gonna light a fire. And so we need to make sure that our system creates opportunities for kids, because our kids have the talent. It's the job of the adults to build pathways for careers and so they can have the choice-filled life.
If we could take kids out of the equation.
Now you got me nervous.
And let's just talk about parents. What do parents need? And it's specifically in those schools, in those areas where children are not reading on grade level.
Yeah. I mean, look, parental engagement is the holy grail, right? We've been trying to create pathways for parental engagement. What I've come to the conclusion of is this: it's incumbent upon the school district to make schools more accessible for parents. Schools do, and I'm a district guy. We call everybody by their last name. We have offices, so it's make it inaccessible. Too many times, parents are only hearing from the schools when the kid's in trouble, when the kid's in crisis. And if we don't, and so what's the answer? How do we do that? This is where we were talking before. I think the Go teams are the answer. I think if we can turn over authentically control, or at least a voice of what happens in the building to parents, then we will look more like our communities and we will be more responsive to our communities. Because if we don't have a mindset that parents are our partners, then, because don't forget, a lot of the parents that in our communities, they didn't have such great experience in school. The school didn't serve them well. And so why are we expecting they're all of a sudden going to be leaning into this partnership? I think we have to, as the school system, we have to create space for parents to be at the table to help make decisions about what happens in the school. And until we do that, I feel like we're constantly going to keep parents at arm's length.
If you are elected to the board, I would like to help comprehensively reach parents in a non-traditional systems approach. We could have programs for parents in different organizations, but going to those homes, knowing that that child has a parent somewhere, 1 or 2 parents somewhere, and who those parents are, I deeply believe that's the key to success with everything. That's my belief. But how we do that and set that up, you're a systems guy, you're gonna have to help me with that.
Yeah.
I mean, there's plenty of room and plenty of money out there to make it happen.
I agree.
And a lot of folk who would like to go to work on that. So I'm saying that right now.
I appreciate you saying that on camera, because it is the right. It's hard to imagine that we can be successful without parents. I mean,
In fact, we can't.
And in fact, we can't. And we as a school district need to recognize we have not done a good enough job to create space for parents.
Right.
And everyone's busy. Schools are heads down. We need to go out of our way. We need to meet parents more than halfway. And part of it is being vulnerable and saying, I don't have all the answers. And that's really hard. But I think in the system where you have a governance council where parents are at the table and actually have meaningful say in what happens, I think good things can happen.
How many schools are served in Atlanta Public right now?
I think there's 60, 70 schools. It depends on how you count some of because there's some schools where you have multiple schools on a campus. And so I think it's 60, I think on the website it's about 60, 65.
And tell us the difference between Atlanta charter schools and Fulton County being a charter district?
Yeah. So you have, we were talking about this before, the language is a little confusing. So there's the charter system, which is a state designation that Fulton has and Atlanta has, which basically says you can be flexible about how you follow, you can get some waivers from education code. Your schools will have local governance councils that help drive what happens at the school. A charter school that we know sort of nationwide is a separate contract between a school and the district that basically says, we're just going to give you the money. We're not going to, you hire your own folks, you run your own curriculum. We'll test you at the end of the year, but you determine everything about your school system. We the school district, are hands off. We're just making sure the kids are safe and that you're testing them.
Our special needs students are tested on the milestone. Are they tested?
Yeah, there's a small percent of kids that aren't tested. There's a waiver for kids that are severe, that are moderate and severe, but generally kids are tested on milestones.
Okay.
I have a question. Facilities has a lot of power within APS. They give data points to the city, to the board, and the board take those into consideration. How would you control facilities, and how would you hold them accountable?
I appreciate the question. I mentioned before, Atlanta's the largest landowner in Atlanta Public Schools is the largest landowner in Atlanta. We have to start with the philosophy that these are community assets. They're not owned. Atlanta Public Schools is stewarding them, but the community paid for these assets. The Atlanta Public Schools is responsible for the upkeep and for how they're being used, but they don't belong to Atlanta Public Schools. I mean, they nominally do, but they're paid for by the community. So that's the place you start. And then is a question of what's the best use of it for kids. And so that may not be a school, that may be a community center, that may be a preschool, that may be, we were talking earlier about early childhood education. It may be a healthcare center. It could be a food bank. It could be whatever it is. But each community is going to have a different set of needs. But but the idea that there's all the, a bunch of schools sitting vacant and not being served, at least not having a plan to be served, that is something I would want to I would want to look at pretty seriously, because again, if you're holding somebody else's asset, and that's the way I think we need to approach this, that it's not, this is our stuff and we decide, it's your stuff and we're here to execute your will as a community.
So would you have a problem pushing back directly against facilities when they give you a long time frame before they can come back with some answers?
Yeah. I mean, that's again, okay. that would be, the question is, what's the best use of this asset for this community? And that could be, it could look at a couple of different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be a school. And it could be, look, we think in 5 years that the population is going to blow up and we may need to build a school here. So I think, I think there's not one size fits all. But we have to move with a sense of urgency, because these are assets that the community needs.
Okay. Omar may not ask this way, but I am going to ask it. I know, I really do, there are various shenanigans that are pulled over in the central office to make sure that contracts which are bidded on are narrowed, skewed, in favor of various contractors, therefore making sure that some contractors are just totally out of the bidding, or can't do business with Atlanta Public Schools. Cheapest is not, as you know, always best. We are very interested in that real estate. I know that a charter school industry was interested in that real estate in Atlanta, because that real estate could help with transportation, it could help with developers. I mean, and it makes billionaires from now on. And so many people don't understand just how important real estate is, where churches are sitting, where schools are sitting, where rails want to come through, who has the right, who has the access. What can you do, if you knew of this, to make sure that there's more accountability and transparency as to who's awarded various contracts with facilities, per facilities in Atlanta Public Schools?
Yeah, I mean, sunshine is the best disinfectant, right? I mean, so everything's just done in the light of day. And again, I think if you start with this mindset that you're managing this resource for somebody else and you're accountable to them, then I think it gets easier. I mean, it's going to require I think new leadership is often required because you need fresh eyes to this work, and so I mean, and you have to move with urgency because again, the community can't wait.
I have 3 questions.
Go ahead.
Wow. Bam.
Teacher unions,
Yeah.
Chicago Teachers Union, versus what you have here in Atlanta, where you got 5 or 6 organizations and half of the people don't belong to anything. Tell us the pros of a teachers union, and then tell us the problems with teacher unions.
Yeah, I mean, so as
Or employee organizations, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and
Go ahead.
associations, right? We mentioned before we talked before about my mom has been in Chicago Public Schools for 25 years, and I won't tell the whole story here, but the teachers union helped her in a real time of need when she wasn't allowed to do the job that she was hired to do, and that was really her calling, and she needed a voice. And so where the unions can be helpful is when they aggregate the voice of the members, because too often, I mean, you're talking about a system with 5,000-6,000 teachers. You need a voice that can represent teachers and be thoughtful about working in partnership with management to make sure we get teachers what they need when they need it. Too often, and I'll take ownership of this too. Too often we think, oh, I know what teachers. This would be great for teachers. This we're going to make a change to benefits. They're going to love it.
Without direct input and democracy
Right.
from teachers.
That's right. And so without that voice around the table saying, hang on, you may think that's the answer, but let me tell you why that's going to be a problem. I remember at Fulton County, we went to we went from monthly because we thought it'd be easier for everybody to get paid monthly, because then they can just manage your bills come monthly, so you want your paycheck to be monthly. And then we actually talked to teachers like, actually biweekly would be better. That would make my life easier to manage. And it was no cost to us to do that. It just was a change of mindset. So
The bank may not have liked that.
well, but you know what? It was
But I'm
it was
go ahead.
it was important
Yes.
to teachers,
Yep.
and not just teachers, but other employee groups. So that's where they can work, is when they aggregate that voice. When you ask where doesn't it work? It's when it's like any organization, when it becomes too concerned with itself and not with the members they represent. That's when I think you see a little bit of that in some of the large unions. Again, sometimes you see it, sometimes that's why I think elections are healthy. They keep it, as long as you're representing the will of the members. I think the UAW, they're having a moment. I mean, they seem like they're going to get what they need. I mean, I'm not that plugged into it, but just from what I read in the paper, I mean, so when you look at the numbers, they're like, what? Look, the leadership, the CEOs gained 40 times what the low wage workers are. It doesn't make any sense. If there's profits, should be spread evenly. So I think they can be helpful when they aggregate the voice. When they get too caught up in their own drama and politics, I think they might lose their way.
Either of you know who Atlanta Public Schools bank with?
I do not.
I don't know.
I'd be interested to know where they're keeping that $1.5 billion that's coming in.
I see your point, because if they're keeping it in one point, really they could spread it out to a minority-owned bank and other ones. Yeah.
Because when Joe Martin was on the board, I don't know, you may not know Joe Martin, you may want to look him up. Hello, Mr. Martin. He lives in Colorado. His brother used to be a state representative, Jim Martin. There was always a fight. Are you going to pay the employees twice a month or once a month? And Joe was real good with figures. And as long as you keep the money, the better off. And then it was a point that they had to fight where Atlanta City would keep the money before they would turn it over directly to the school district.
That's a good question. I don't know the answer.
Now, in Atlanta, we've had problems because of the state laws. And I tell people I voted Democrat most of my life. Every now and then, I will vote for candidates who belong to the Republican Party, because I started looking beyond color and beyond party. That was a segue to something else, and now I'm forgetting. But that's because I'm almost 70, right? All right. You are running for District 3, where you have an incumbent. Why should we replace the incumbent?
So I know the incumbent well. A neighbor down the street. Called her before we ran and told her I was going to run and was going to run a relentlessly positive campaign. But I am going to draw a distinction on the issues. She's been there for a couple terms. The issues that we started with, you asked what are the challenges. I believe those are fixable, and I believe they haven't been fixed. And so we talk about the superintendent transition. So again, we're going to be hiring our fourth superintendent in 5 years. That's, what does the board do? The board does policy and a bunch of stuff, but really the two biggest things the board does is hire and fire the superintendent and manage and approve a budget. Those are the two biggest rocks, and I think those things are not where I think they need to be. The central office should not be growing 20% a year. The schools, and by the way, for folks out there going to get your tax bill in a couple weeks, I didn't send it to you, but it's going to come either way. It's going to be 9.7% higher. That's something that people feel. And so I feel those issues of superintendent transition, superintendent, turmoil, the budget not making it out to schools, and of course the ongoing challenges with literacy. Those are the things that I feel like I'm ready to go. I can build a majority to help make progress on those issues.
I'm about 5 years from being 70, so y'all don't kick me out right now. Listen, the CARES Act money, and I'm saying this because I live in DeKalb County, and I'm watching my tax bill. Also, the school district seems to be hiring more people at the top. And when we're talking about people at the top, we're not necessarily just talking about these positions that they advertise. But now we're going to wrap this up. Thank you so much. This has been great.
I really
enjoyed
appreciate
talking with you.
Yeah, I feel like we could go.
Your children in Atlanta Public Schools.
That's right. Yeah,
okay,
that's right.
How many do you have?
I have 3. One just graduated from Midtown High School, and she's at Georgia Tech this year. Go Jackets, I think is what I'm told to say.
Yeah,
but they're not
Jackets.
competitive in football, so they're not going to give Georgia any trouble. But yeah, I have my kids have gone all the way through Atlanta Public Schools.
Okay. Anything that you want to leave us with to wrap us up with?
Just to kind of end where we started, which is this is a really important time in the history of Atlanta Public Schools. We're going to be choosing a new superintendent. We're going to be spending $1.7 billion. We need folks to get out and vote. There are 83,000 people in District 3, and by my calculations, I think less than 5,000 are going to vote.
That's right. And it takes money to run school board races. If the voters wanted to look at your campaign contributions, where would they go?
So it's on the city. The city has us do disclosures. So I think it's Easy Campaign Atlanta. If you Google it, it'll pop up, and it's all right there. Every nickel I've raised is from a person. I haven't raised any money from organizations. Most of the folks who live in the district. I do have some friends from family and stuff from outside the district, but it's all folks I know. So but I do think it's important to be transparent about that, because
And you're not trying to be superintendent.
No.
You definitely have that background.
I do, but but until we get the board right, the idea that we're going to find this superintendent that can do everything is going to require some magical thinking. The board needs to get focused on policy, get focused on where they are, what direction they're headed, and then we will bring in a world-class superintendent to serve all the kids of Atlanta Public Schools.
Okay.
You want anything?
No, he answered all the questions. You asked the last 2. I was going to ask 2, so we're
Oh,
good.
This has been a pleasure.
I appreciate it. Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Verdaillia.
All right, good luck.
I appreciate it.
All right.